Hello, I'm Martijn Graat and this is Does Logistics Matter? A podcast on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics. Answering yes to the question again today is Miguel van Asch, Head of Data Analytics Services at Ahlers, who has been on the show before. In this episode, we talk about how an automotive supplier used a digital twin to improve their contingency planning and made their supply chain more resilient. We also learn more about how scenarios run with their digital twin improved operations and increased efficiency. If you want to learn more about what a digital twin is and how you can create one for your company, please listen to episode 14, The Benefits of a Digital Twin. Please enjoy my conversation with Miguel van Asch. Miguel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Martin. Happy to be back.
Yeah, so well, I always ask the question, does logistics matter? But you already answered that question by yes, and my guess is that answer is still the same.
Absolutely. Logistic matter, and we are a firm believer of that. So, you know my background, you know what I believe in, and I think more and more logistic keep matter, but will matter more in the future as well. So definitely yes.
Yeah, Miguel, I fully agree with you, of course. In our last episode, we spoke about a digital twin and what the power of a digital twin is for supply chain and logistics operations. Can you give a quick recap of what a digital twin is?
Yeah, sure. So last time we talked about how you can leverage data coming from your supply chain and where you can make let's say a digital representation of the reality to make sure that you have some kind of sandbox to play with alternative scenarios, alternative what if analysis to make your logistics a lot more efficient and let's say risk proof.
Great. Yeah. So, and today we are going to speak about an actual digital twin and some of the strategic decisions that this actual digital twin gave a company.
Yeah. So I brought a business case with me, triggering the creation of this type of technology and how it can be used. So I'm very keen to explain a little bit what we've done, what the reasons for the projects were in the beginning, and how we finally end up with some tangible results that I think are very understandable for the listeners and for people who are active in logistics.
So what was wrong, or what needed to be improved?
Well, it's something you hear in quite a lot of webinars and things lately, but the main driver for the creation of this a digital twin, as you can call it, was the COVID-19 disruption.
Okay.
So basically, and before I go into the problem, I'll maybe introduce the company a little bit. The company I'm talking about is a producer of cooling liquids for machines and car engines. So their biggest customers are car manufacturers. Think of the BMWs, the Volvos, the large car manufacturers that you know, but also equipment manufacturers like Caterpillar, for example, because they deliver the product that cools the engines of the cars and every equipment that we're talking about. So you can imagine they're part of the car supply chain, and the car supply chain is typically a supply chain that focuses on time. It's all
it's very demanding.
Yeah. So it's all just in time. These suppliers are expected to arrive at the customer site just in time to make sure that they're not that much stock levels. And also, car manufacturers, they produce their cars in a continuous flow. So all product coming or arriving late results in the conveyor actually stopping. So not arriving in time leads to huge penalties,
Yeah.
leads to a lot of problems. So risk and contingency, or risk management and contingency, is one of the key drivers in this business case. Also, the key
Yeah.
driver why our customer said, okay, we need to do something about it. We need to make sure that we are prepared for the different scenarios that are coming to us. Um, and that was basically the reason for the business case, because we
Mm-hmm.
were mid COVID times. Businesses were um, facing all of these challenges, and the main challenge that our cooling liquid manufacturer was facing was that the border waiting times were rising. Border waiting
Yeah.
times, think of trucks standing in line at the canal or the channel towards England,
Yeah.
but also other borders were sometimes yeah, where we had increasing waiting times, meaning that
Mm-hmm.
that influenced the just-in-time operations of our customer a lot, because they were expecting trucks to come pick up their goods at their site in Antwerp, but then they arrived late. There was already another truck loading, so it quite often there was chaos in that
Yeah.
story because of all those waiting times appearing due to COVID. So there's actually no real overview on what the impact was, but there was also no real overview on what they could do to make sure that they could cope with this new reality. Um,
Yeah.
so we started working quite intensively with them. I think last time in the previous podcast, I talked about a project always starting to understand the business problems of the customer. So that's exactly what we've done. We've
Mm-hmm.
worked quite intense with them for a couple of months to map their data, to understand their business rules, to understand how trucks are loaded. We visited their site a couple of times to really understand what the flow through the factory was, what a truck had to do to be loaded, what the different stages were. Um, and then used all of that insight um, to make the digital copy. And now the digital copy was not about the whole supply chain network, but really of that specific site that was impacted. So we modeled all the loading stations, we modeled the loading and unloading docks, we modeled the full process that a truck had to go through. Think of strapping, think of staging, think of collecting papers at the end of the process. So that full process was really monitored, and the data was guiding us in how it was going today. What were the bottlenecks? Where or what factors led to loading taking longer, and what happened in case of trucks missing their loading slots. So
Yeah, so so it sounds so if you first hear it, you think, oh yeah, we're gonna do something with transportation because
mhm,
there's wait times at the border and things are trucks are coming late.
mhm,
But you actually took a few steps back and looked at a much broader process,
exactly.
and it sounds like it started almost at the point where goods were taken out of the racking by a forklift and driven to the loading area. I get
Yeah,
that was the
yeah,
starting point.
exactly. That was the starting point, because we didn't want to mess too much with production. Production was actually a driver, so we didn't really have
Yeah.
influence on that. But as soon as the goods were ready to transport or ready to be loaded, we really took the full holistic view, from loading, unloading, truck arriving, towards the drive time to the customer. And because we were living in that new reality of border waiting times, we had to
Mm-hmm.
take them as a given. So we couldn't really change the border waiting time. So we had to
Yeah.
efficiently manage operations, taking into account that border waiting times would occur. So that's why we looked at the full chain. Um, by building the full process in a digital replica, um, we were also able to understand what the impact was if they would do nothing, and if trucks would start coming in late. So we can to really make it practical, we had a waiting time simulator, having
Yeah.
simulating trucks coming in later and later, and then we could also see what that meant for the KPIs in the factory or in the warehouse, because we could see,
Mm-hmm.
for example, more trucks being in line, the parking lot getting full because trucks were waiting to get loaded. We could see longer loading times. So by really simulating more trucks coming in late, we could understand the impact, and that was the essential first step. And then we could think of alternative scenarios. Um, we
Yeah.
looked at we looked at quite some different options. To give you a couple of examples, we wanted to add extra capacity in the loading area. So we built an extra loading station where our customer could use that loading station whenever a truck came in late. Then they could say, okay, the truck is late. Let's take the emergency loading station and make sure that the flow of the full factory is maintained, and that we not lose too much time.
Ah.
Um,
Yeah.
that was one of the examples. We looked at um,
You took the exception out of the regular
yeah,
process.
yeah, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. One of the solutions that we thought about. We also looked at the planning process. So now trucks were getting an exact hour slot on when they had to be loaded.
Mm-hmm.
We also looked at, is it an idea to give them a range of timings that they could arrive in between, so we could plan more efficiently. We looked at um, doing some extra hours before, or increasing the opening hours a little bit, but
Yeah.
that is of course sometimes a little bit more challenging. But
Yeah.
just to show you that actually, um, once we had the current situation in place, once we could understand the impact of more delays, that we could then think together with management of potential solutions, um, and and really understand, okay, for what products will we be late, for what customers will we be late, what are the pain points, and then also think of the new reality. Now, the outcome was quite interesting. I think the example I gave about the loading station um, is actually something they have now implemented as well. So they are really working with an extra loading station to buffer a little bit the capacity for loading. Um, and they still use also our digital twin application, because that's also one of the key messages I would like to give, is that um, while we've used now the digital twin for this specific COVID-19 border waiting time problem, we
Mm-hmm.
can keep using it, because it represents company data, or at least site data. It represents the exact flow that every truck has to go to. So if tomorrow the trucks are no longer stuck due to border waiting times, and COVID-19, but there is another disruptancy. Maybe containers are not coming in because there is something going on in the Suez Canal, for example. We can
Yeah.
still leverage what we've built. We can still leverage the technology we have to simulate new impact, to simulate new risk, new contingency. And a good example there for the exact same customer, because now the border waiting times are not really a thing anymore. But they were also thinking, okay, we have now that digital twin. What if suddenly we cannot deliver from our current location anymore? Should we open a new
Yeah.
location? Should we put buffer stock somewhere? How do we make sure that we can manage the contingency there? So we actually took the same model, the same data of the digital twin, and solved that other issue as well. So it's kind of flexible. You can kind of keep using it, reusing it, and optimize along the way. So um, that's, I think, a little bit also a key takeaway, that you don't just have to reuse, or you don't just have to solve one specific problem, but it can be used for broader use. Um, maybe to conclude, or at least some final results in terms of hard KPIs on the specific border waiting time
Yeah.
problem. I think what we achieved in this use case is that we decreased the turnaround times. The turnaround times that were actually increasing due to the border waiting times, we brought them back down. I think it was around 10%, making sure that we could still ensure on-time deliveries and that they remained manageable in times of crisis because we were in COVID-19. And that allowed us to avoid the penalties that the company was facing. So in that sense, the data really helped us to work on these specific KPIs and to manage them in a time of disruption, let's say. So I think that quite well shows you the challenge we had, the solution we brought of it, and then the tangible results that came out of it.
Yeah, Miguel, that's an excellent example of the power of a digital twin. Thank you for that. So for companies that want to work with you and your team of data specialists, how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think, Martin, there are multiple ways of working together, but I think the most common one, and I talked about it already a little bit when we were talking about the process and how you build up a digital twin. Typically, it starts with a project, a project of a couple months where we work together quite intensively on the pain you have and on building it up, on really installing the technology and making it company proof, let's say, or customer proof. So that's quite often how we work as a starting point on project basis, making sure that we can deliver a proof of concept or solve one problem that is very much hurting for the customer. But more and more we see now, and that's because of the reality we're in today, is that companies want to leverage this and want to do this on a more permanent basis. So apart from the project approach that we offer, which is typically something where we do mandates and we try to understand where we need to go and try to estimate the effort. More and more, we also have some kind of subscription formula for the software and the analysis that we provide, where we see quite some customers who want to make use of the technology on a more continuous basis, and that's again where we call it continuous design, where we also provide them with a way to keep using the technology, and where we have subscription formulas to keep making use of our services, and there we can really go into a long-term relationship with the customer. And we firmly believe that it's also in those type of relationship that there is the most value, because we can look at the data on a more permanent basis. We can gather more data. We can recognize the change of data patterns that have been going on for quite a longer time. So in that sense, our main approach is our goal is to become part of that data journey and go into that subscription model. But it's of course possible that a company is really looking for one specific question that they want to have solved, and there we work on a more project basis. So that's typically the two ways. And what we see is that if you go for the project approach, quite often it leads to some kind of subscription model if you have seen the value of it. But that depends on a case by case basis, to be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one of the things that I found really interesting in your story and your approach is, when you talk about digital twin and you talk about a team of data analysts, you see people behind screens. And you guys actually went into the facility and you looked at the physical processes and looked at how pallets are wrapped and how they are loaded to model that into a data model.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's where you guys make a difference. Like no assumptions. You actually go in and you look at what the physical constraints are. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, and if I can comment on that, Martijn, a little bit on the team, that's a very big focus for us, because it comes again to your question: does logistic matter, or does it matter? For us, very much yes, because we don't want to be just data analysts. But the education that my team goes through is also very much focused on a logistics background, because we're solving logistic problems, and for that we need to have a logistic DNA rather than just a data DNA, let's say. And I think that's the reason also why we can do this from um, with the name Ahlers, or with the company Ahlers behind us, because we are logistics experts. We are in logistics already for over 100 years. So we also have the people who have been with their boots on the ground. And I think to come back to your point, that is something we feel that is very valuable, because in these type of exercises, sometimes you need a price for a new lane that is not happening in your network yet. We can use our logistic expert to estimate that price. Sometimes you need to understand what the limitations of wrapping are, like you mentioned in your example. We need to have people who know, or we need to have experts who know what the logistics implications are. So we tend to introduce ourselves more as logistic engineers rather than data specialists, even though we have data skills. But I think it's very important to never lose sight of the business requirements and the business constraints that a company is facing, because that's what we're trying to solve.
Excellent, Miguel. Thank you very much for being on the show again. It was a very interesting story. I think you've given an excellent example of the potential that a digital twin has. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, Martijn. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Does Logistics Matter? For more on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics, visit our blog at www.logisticsmatter.com. This podcast was produced by Dimitri Vleugel. The music is based on a sample by Ruggerman and produced by Michael Spengler. This episode was sponsored by Ahlers. For more than 110 years, Ahlers has been helping clients all over the world. Active in 3 regions, Europe, CIS and Asia, they provide state-of-the-art logistics and tailor-made solutions. Their services focus on supply chain solutions, warehousing, project and machinery logistics, secure transportation of high-value and/or theft-sensitive goods, trade facilitation and after-sales services, and supply chain data analytics. Ahlers finds the best solutions that fit the customer profile perfectly. They enable customers to stay focused on their core business and manage innovative supply chain solutions which add value. They solve supply chain challenges in complex environments. Find out more at www.ahlers.com. That's AHLERS.